Welcome to Everyday Buddhism, making every day better by applying the proven tools found in Buddhist concepts. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Everyday Buddhism, making every day better. Now today I'm going to move on with our look at the Eightfold Path from right intention, or how to be less of a jerk, to right speech, which I've subtitled Zip It. Before I jump into it, though, I wanted to share how thrilled I am with the positive responses to this podcast. I've received wonderful comments on my website and on podcast platforms, and I've received awesome reviews and 5-star ratings on the iTunes Apple Music platform. So if you like this podcast, I would love it if you would write a quick review, give it a rating on the iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast platform. You know, the ratings and the reviews are what make the podcast visible to others who wouldn't have known about it otherwise. And if you believe, like I do, that the tips and tricks I share every week are helpful for everyone, it would be awesome if you could do your part to make this podcast more visible. Just this Friday, I received a comment from a new listener, Christine, who said, "There are so many people who need these messages." I agree, Christine, and that's why I do this work. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who's welcomed me so warmly to, the world of podcasting. Another little bit of information before I get to the subject of right speech is to let you know that my intention is to get a new podcast released once a week. As you may have noticed, it isn't always on the same day, and it isn't always within 7 days. But it's close enough for podcasting, right? We used to say that in broadcasting. Close enough for broadcasting. But it's still my intention to release a new one every week. So I hope you follow or subscribe so that new episodes get downloaded automatically to your phone or your tablet or your computer. So, okay, with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, onward to right speech. So, you know what's ironic? This show on right speech, which I've subtitled as Zip It, I think could possibly be my longest episode, or at least one of my longest episodes. I have so many notes. You think right view and right intention were a challenge? Right speech is the most difficult of all. Not difficult to understand, but difficult to accomplish. Because it is the most difficult to accomplish, I truly think it is our most important daily practice. If a thing is hard, it means you need to work on it. Especially in this age of speech at the speed of internet connectivity. The internet has instant speed of your words thrown around like the empty promises of a politician in an election year. Although I think it's even worse than that. I think they're thrown around without a second thought. It's that old lizard brain description of the amygdala I talked about in other episodes. So let's reflect for a minute. Other than thinking, what do you spend the most time doing, in your active waking hours? Talking. We're always talking. Even when we're listening, we're talking, mentally creating our responses. I view my thoughts as speech as well. I'm not sure about you, but I tell myself stories about myself and about other people and what I'm going to say and what they said and what I should have said. It's like a constant narrative running in the head. And back before the internet, which some of you may not even remember, we still talked all the time, gossiping with our coworkers and neighbors. But now, with texting and the endless social media forums, it's a constant stream of yap, sharing our opinion of everything with everyone. This constant social media opinionating always reminds me of Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame. He said that back in 1968. He said, "In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes." I think we've all had way more than our 15 minutes of fame thanks to the internet, thanks to social media. It's like we really think everyone needs to or is waiting for my opinion on whatever. The weather, Trump and Russia, the GOP, the Democrats, the economy, tariffs, national anthem protests, gun violence, on and on and on. Whenever I'm tempted to spout off on something like that, I stop and say, really? Who cares what you think? When were we all meteorologists or political analysts or sociologists or psychologists? We seem to think we have some sort of an informed opinion on everything. So my stop mantra is a combination of what I just said, who cares what you think, and what do you really know about this subject, whatever it is, fill in the blank, anyway? So now I say these are my stop before you spout mantras. But before you get me wrong and get the wrong idea that these work to stop me, they work to have me zip it, but they don't always work. I still spout. And I must admit here, I'm feeling a little weird sense of hypocrisy talking about this on a podcast featuring me. Ugh. But as a reminder, this podcast is entitled Everyday Buddhism. I am not a Buddhist expert. I am not a particularly good Buddhist practitioner. I'm just sharing my personal experience using Buddhist-inspired tips and tricks to make my life a little easier and a little happier. And that, therefore, hopefully will translate to you trying them out and seeing if it works for you. Last year I took a personal vow to not share my opinion about anything on the internet, unless it was a positive, inspiring message. I took the same vow a few years before, also probably in an post-election period. The first time, actually, the fact that I've taken this vow twice can kind of give you a hint on how well it's worked sometimes. But the first time I made the vow about 4 years ago or so, I didn't do very good. But the second time, last year, I did much better. And I've stuck to, keeping it zipped. Most of the time, anyway. And when I screw up, I'm generally disgusted with myself. The good thing, though, is that I'm pretty quick in either stopping or self-correcting now. It's like one of my teachers always said, you can check to see if your practice is working by looking at the length of time between having a thought about something and then acting on it with your behavior, your speech. When you first start practicing, the time span could be a day or longer before you feel regret or disgust or, wow, I shouldn't have done that. But it gets shorter and shorter if you stick to the practice. The sort of, I think my teacher used to say, we're shooting for like a second here. I mean, I haven't gotten that close, but if I can get within a minute or two, I'm pretty happy. If I can get within a few minutes, I'm pretty happy. If I can get within an hour, I'm pretty happy. I just don't want to make it so that I say it and then regret it next day. So another thing that comes from my Buddhist background in thinking about right speech is the concept of the value of listening as being more important than speech. And this, in Buddhist legend mythology, is indicated by the fact that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. I think about that a lot. And also, when I first started practicing in the Tibetan tradition at a local Tibetan Buddhist center, it was pointed out to me how the representations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in art, sculpture, whatever, have these huge ears, very large ears, and really kind of tiny mouths. It's seemingly out of proportion, I think, to those of us that look at them from our current artistic standards. Check it out sometime. Get on Google, do a search for Buddhist and Bodhisattva images, and wow, look at those ears. Interesting, huh? If our current culture was represented that way, we would look like emoticons. All mouth and no ears. Isn't that weird? Buddha images, Bodhisattva images have these huge ears. Emoticons don't have ears at all. Interesting. I don't know what to make of it, but I just think that's a interesting little tidbit. So back to speech, language is a conceptualization. And by its nature, it discriminates, separates, labels, and judges. Every time we talk, speech conceptualizes external things, then cements or reifies your internal expression into a self-existent external thing by making it like something. So it then gets categorized or becomes a type rather than just an experience, a moment where circumstances coincide to produce a feeling or an event. No. We've got to reify it. We have to make it solid. You ever notice when you ever go anywhere anymore, everybody's taking pictures of everything. I agree. It's great to remember, lovely things that you experience in your day-to-day or on your nature walks or on vacation. But boy, I think this picture-taking thing we have keeps us away from the actual experience of the thing we're experiencing. I have the urge too. We were at the beach on Friday, beautiful day, lots of wind, heavy waves, and I dragged my little sand beach bench. Renee and I dragged our benches into the water. Or not a bench, our chairs into the water, and the waves were washing over us. And of course, you had to take your phone off and your watch off and your Fitbit off and all those things we depend on. And there were so many interesting things I wanted to take pictures of. And I realized it was just this constant impulse. See something, take a picture of it, make it stop, instead of just being in the experience. I think that's part of our problem. We want to turn something into something else rather than just being the thing, experiencing the thing. My spouse says this about speech and about labeling things or putting them into boxes. She says, anything after the words I am is a lie. That's true, isn't it? And if practiced, it is the most direct practice of right view and right speech possible. Because you are entirely empty of anything after I am in the present moment. And really, that's it, the present moment. That's the whole practice of the now. That's the practice of life. What are you now? Well, you could say I'm cold, or I'm hot, or I'm mad, or I have an itch, or my ear aches, or whatever. But really, saying that is putting an experience maybe you just had onto what you are now. Or if you're fearful, experience of what you're fearful of in the future onto what you are now. But in reality, you just are. Speech as we use it is primarily an offensive weapon of the ego, or its defensive armor, if you will. Speech is an absolute and direct expression of grasping to a sense of self, to a discrete identity. Promoting this meanness with our words and further reinforcing our own view of separateness and disconnection from the happiness and suffering of others. Every time we hear ourselves talk about what is happening to me, we shore up that false division between ourselves and others. When we are driven to speak, most of the time or much of the time, the impulse that drives the speech is sometimes, or most of the time, I really think, a state of mind that is not positive. and does not hold right intention or right view. We have all had the experience of feeling hurt by something someone did or said to you, and then you feel this absolute rushing need to tell someone about it immediately. Which, of course, what does that do? It focuses the mind of the speaker and the listener. In other words, the person you're complaining, you, the complainer, and the person you're complaining to, on the other person, the bad person. And then that builds the concept of you as a good person who was wronged and now is absolutely justified in your use of wrong speech. Many Dharma teachers instruct their students in the application of right speech by encouraging them to never talk about anyone, good or bad, if that person is not there to hear. If you try, I think that makes a lot of sense, because if you try to do that as a practice, you will quickly observe that we spend far too much time talking about people who aren't with us at the moment. And every time we do, we are alienating ourselves from the present moment. So, because if the person is not there, right, then we must be talking about something in the past. And probably alienating ourselves from right intention, because we're conceptualizing this person. We're painting a picture with words based on our thoughts of the person or our thoughts of the experience we had with that person, rather than the actual causal experience, because our thoughts came after. The concept of right speech is not only Buddhist advice, but it's found in all great teachings. You know, Jesus said that it isn't what goes into your mouth that defiles you, but what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. And Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote about the ancient Toltec wisdom in his book, The Four Agreements, said, quote, "If we can see it is our agreements which rule our life, and we don't like the dream of our life, then we need to change the agreements." So his agreements were, number 1, be impeccable with your word. Number 2, don't take anything personally. Number 3, don't make assumptions. And number 4, always do your best. Now, you got to notice that impeccable with your word is the first agreement. Don Miguel Ruiz calls it the most important and the most difficult agreement to honor. He says about your word or speech is that it's the creative power, your creative power. It's a force, he says, that creates the events in your life. And he says it's with that force that we actually cast spells on ourselves and each other with our word. I totally get that, because if we say enough times this person is this way, then we can't ever see them in another way, because we've solidified or reified, as I said before, boxed that person into this caricature of this kind of person. Okay, this person is judgmental, and I don't want to deal with them. Or this person is I keep thinking of political references, which I really shouldn't use, but hey, it's so much in our culture. So this person is a Trumpster, right? And you'll never. He's not worth talking to, or whatever. Whatever we're doing, we are fixing them as this thing that's really not that person, because that person's changing at every minute. So now that I've got your attention about the importance of right speech and how important this third path of the Eightfold Path is, I think it's time for me to come clean. This is the most difficult of the right practices for me to master. You know, when I was in 3rd grade, I won the Chatty Cathy Award. And unless you're my age, you probably don't even get this reference to Chatty Cathy. Chatty Cathy was a doll made by Mattel in the late late 50s, I think, early 1960s, using the cutting edge technology of the time, like a phonographic record inside the doll and a string that you pulled to make that needle go over that record. If you pulled the string on her back, she talked. Despite the fact, her lips never actually really moved, but she talked. Or the record talked and said stuff like, "I love you. I hurt myself. Please take me with you. Or let's play school. Or may I have a cookie?" All those really profound things. Anyway, about my award. It wasn't a good thing at all. I was talking in class, and the teacher made me wear a sign all day. And she insisted and ordered me to wear it all the way home. And I was a walker, I didn't get on the bus. So I had to walk home, and so therefore everyone could see my sign as I walked through town. The sign said, "Chatty Cathy." Looking back, I think that teacher wasn't exhibiting skillful means in ostracizing a student by wearing a sign all the way home. But, it did have an effect on me. I didn't know what wrong speech was at the time, but I do remember thinking that I probably talked too much. I was using wrong speech as that third grader. Wrong speech in the fact that it was too much speech and it was idle speech. And I continue to use wrong speech every day, I'm sure, and probably many times a day. Before you think that I lie or swear constantly, I would point out that it is much more subtle than that. And once I completely come clean with you, you might see how much you have to confess yourself. So my first confession is this. As the Chatty Cathy Award sort of pre-indicated of my inclinations even into adulthood, I'm a talker. Well, here I am doing a podcast. I guess I'm a talker. I love to talk, and it comes quite naturally in all situations with all people. And that can be a very good thing. I can make pleasant conversation with almost anyone. But sometimes I think I should shut up. Sometimes I think I should zip it. My mother told me when I was young that I inherited her gift of gab, and she did have a gift of gab. My father, though, used to comment, "You sure can talk." As you see, to some, this talking is a gift. To others, a questionable trait. Now, how do we discipline our talking? Well, there's a set of 10 vows in Buddhism, referred to as the 10 non-virtues, or the freedom vows. They are grouped by the 3 gateways. In other words, gateways meaning your gateways of your behavior, which would be body, speech, and mind. Of the 10, then, 3 are related to the body, 3 are related to the mind, but 4 are related to the speech. The 4 things that you should watch for when trying to practice right speech are these. And they're all written as a refrain or restrain yourself. So it's refrain from lying, refrain from divisive talk, refrain from harsh words, and refrain from idle talk. Now, right speech is truthful, gentle, peaceful, and meaningful. As I detail how easy it is not to be truthful, gentle, peaceful, and meaningful in your speech, I'll continue to make my public confessions. Being truthful in an impeccable way is a lot more difficult than just not telling a lie. Truthful speech means not just not lying, but not even giving someone or our own selves the wrong impression. We do that all the time. We purposely give people impressions that we're more in control, less fearful, more positive, happier, healthier, whatever. And how do we do that? We do it with our words. We carefully leave words out or choose particular words to have a certain effect. We don't even think about it. It's natural. It's an instinct, I would say. But it is really lying, isn't it? We tell stories that are based on grasping to outcomes we want. We tell stories to ourselves and others. Either way, it's lying. I know I manipulate impressions. I pretend to understand what someone is explaining to me when I'm really hopelessly confused. So what's the harm in that, right? My intention is good, right? The harm is that it's based on wrong view and wrong intention. The foundation of the rest of the behaviors that are added on, which we're working on now, which is right speech. So every time we purposely leave an impression or utter a word that is not totally, impeccably true, we are testifying to sort of our belief or our view in externals, our belief in dual concepts as truth. That's wrong view. Because do I really believe that if I pretend to know something when this person's telling me something and I'm helplessly confused, then my circumstances or my life will change, will act in response to the way I acted as if I knew something, but I really didn't? It's ridiculous. Circumstances result from true causes, not deliberate misimpressions. The conditions that result from deliberate misspeaking will be the conditions corresponding to the truth, but also the conditions corresponding to your deliberate act of misinforming. And that is obviously wrong intention, because every time you allow someone to have the wrong impression about you, your intention was what? To confuse? To lie? It really doesn't seem like such a big deal. I get it. But every little deal makes you believe that the truth isn't important. It's a subtle sort of buying into or conditioning of your mind that the truth, being impeccable with your word, really isn't important. And every little deal makes you think so much that it's not important that the little deals kind of stretch out and to get to be bigger and bigger until they're not little deals anymore. Sure, you can fool people. They won't know the difference, nor will they care probably. But as one of my teachers said, and this is critical for me in thinking about sort of checking my behaviors, is if you're going to do something you know is wrong, you might as well do it with the door open, because you are the one creating your own karma. It's not about being caught by some external judge. Okay, the next practice is to refrain from divisive talk and harsh words, which means to use gentle speech. So we had the first one, refraining from lying. Now we're refraining from divisive talk and harsh words, but using instead gentle speech. So what is gentle speech? It's refraining from harsh, critical, judgmental, impatient, and annoyed speech. And boy, can I be impatient and annoyed and critical and judgmental. I don't think I'm harsh so much anymore, but I think I got the rest covered half the time. Like my social media vow. In making slips, I noticed that it wasn't that I posted blatantly hateful comments or aggressive in-your-face quote sharing, but those little subtle ones that proudly declare me as something or wave my allegiance or belief in something that at the same time sarcastically pokes fun at the other side, quote unquote, other side. Yet I think those are even worse than, harsh in your face calling out. The subtle stuff I think is even worse because it masquerades as harmless. It masquerades as a harmless support for a cause, and then, therefore, consequently, a stand against a cause. And it seduces you, yourself, me, into thinking that what I'm doing isn't really divisive, but informative. And at the same time, there's this tiny tinge of smug self-righteousness you feel when you post it, right? What is that? I think it is a rejoicing in your otherness. We make others out of people who don't think like us, don't believe like us, don't live like us, don't love like us. Yet I am always someone else's other. It is a self-perpetuating misadventure that divides acquaintances, friends, family members, churches, states, countries, and the world. And as much as I love the internet, Facebook, social media in general, those channels can be particularly conducive to participating in acts of mindless divisiveness. Every time we share a strongly one-sided political or religious link to a news article, or an editorial, or a blog, we are declaring we are something. We stand for something. And therefore, we create that pretty obvious border between everybody else who doesn't stand for that. Granted, sometimes you just have to share some positive bit of news that you're happy about or something that is truly informative. I think that's the great thing and one of the joys about Facebook, being able to rejoice in others' happiness. As long as it's not information you are sharing to change others' minds to quote unquote your side. But do we have to keep waving our flags of belonging over and over again? It seems to me, and I am guilty of this, that this is nothing other than the basest of tribal behavior, which by its nature is dualistic and divisive. Let's face it, after one or two of these postings, most of our Facebook friends already know how we feel about things and what side we're on. After that, aren't we really only trying to push it in the faces of our friends who don't share our beliefs? Aren't we really rubbing it in? I am particularly offended by the divisive nature of those poke fun at postings I see routinely on Facebook. These are the ones sharing the latest political or religious bashing, jokes, satires, cartoons, and videos from late night talk, comedy, wherever. I might even find them funny and giggle if I am on the right side. But if not, it feels downright mean-spirited. Facebook, internet chat groups, social media make it very easy to be snarky and even downright abusive in ways we wouldn't dream of doing on a face-to-face or phone basis. I think we could all agree that we'd never tell a Christian joke to someone we know is an evangelical Christian at a dinner party or a business meeting. Yet do we even stop to think that that's what we're doing with some of the things we post on Facebook? Zen Shin Michael Hederley wrote about this phenomena in an article in the winter 2009 Tricycle magazine called Dharma Wars. He quoted John Suller, a psychology professor at Rider University, who says that internet users readily fall prey to what Suller calls the, quote, online disinhibition effect, unquote. Suller says the medium itself drives you to act out in ways you normally wouldn't because, quote, people experience their computers and online environments as extensions of themselves, extensions of their minds, and therefore they feel free to project these inner dialogues into exchanges with others, unquote. I've witnessed this very thing myself. This past election season and the year after, and even earlier debates over the Supreme Court's ruling on the Affordable Care Act or same-sex marriage, people who I wouldn't have expected to reacted in angry and vocal ways, surprising me. Even if they didn't always directly commented, they posted very angry links or gave likes to aggressive, sarcastic, and angry thoughts on both sides. It made me question my own posting behavior and encouraged me to renew that vow to question each thing I'm tempted to post or like before I do post or like it, as a test to see if it is something I would say directly and face-to-face to anyone or anyone that I've allowed to view my post, any of my friend list. Since I've renewed that vow, I've stopped myself many times. Think about it. And most importantly, I think reflecting on words you use that could offend or make others feel uncomfortable is the best way to go about this. I have a feeling that your reaction to these refrains I'm talking about, maybe that it doesn't apply to me because you're not harsh, you're not critical. I'd probably think that if I was listening to this talk. But I have another confession to make. I do use non-gentle speech quite regularly. One of my Buddhist teachers admits to this problem. He says it's actually hard to find anyone that doesn't occasionally utter a bad word. There's lots of them. And these days it's culturally accepted to use them. And if you work in a normal Western work environment, it's even more likely that one of these has found its way into your regular vocabulary. For many years, I worked in broadcasting and television as an engineer. I was one of the first women engineers, and I found myself at the age of 19 working among men. Now, I grew up with brothers, so it was a household of men. But, the work environment is very different than a family. So my vocabulary got very colorful, and it has taken me many years to try to break the habit. 19 was a long time ago for me. The good news then is I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at breaking the habit. I should be after all these years, but I'm still not perfect. But practice does help. My teacher admitted to using questionable speech as a part of his teaching presentations too. And I too admit that those words fly out of my mouth when I'm presenting and when I'm going for effect. But why? Think about it the next time. Ask yourself, is this really what I want to say? Does it convey any meaning? Listen to your speech and mark the words that find their way into your vocabulary. My mother, who died 21 years ago today, so I'll honor her with this story of her wonderful, open humanness and the ability to make fun of herself. She used to jokingly say her favorite word was shit. People laughed, and my mother used it as her explosive expletive, her word of frustration. And guess what? Now, of course, it comes flying out of my mouth every time I stub my toe. But couldn't it as easily be rats or sheesh? My spouse's father used to say gads. Used to go golfing with him. And when he blew it, when I blew it on the golf course, I probably said shit. And he always said gads. I like gads. Gentle speech is speech that brings people together rather than dividing them. It is helpful, compassionate, and considerate of people's feelings. Speaking in ways that bring other people together is opposite to our normal human tendency. We tend to divide others in order to bring people around to our side, right? Attaching ourselves to expectations. We say, did you hear what he said about you? Or we say, did you hear what Trump said to someone who voted for and supported him? I'm also guilty of this divisive speech. It isn't so long ago that I jumped on the bandwagon to gossip about a professional associate. I'm not sure why. Maybe I wanted to reassure myself that I was right in feeling anger or frustration with this person. So the longer the group talked about her, the better I felt? I don't know. Maybe I thought it would make them like me more. See, I think we talk many times to be liked. I honestly don't know why I do it. And I know it's wrong for me to do it because it really can't help my situation, their situation, or the person being gossiped about. So why do we talk like that? The media that surrounds us is full of that kind of divisive speech. It's everywhere. Social media, cable news, talk shows, reality TV, radio talk, whatever. It's all about exposing how bad, how wrong, how stupid, how illegal, how liberal, how conservative someone or some group is, in hopes of generating this response that I call it a Colosseum-like mob mentality. It's, we gotta get them. When it's done in news, it's not journalism, but it gets ratings. Yet absurd as it seems to most, it seeps into our consciousness like poison gas or a virus in an email attachment. We don't think we're affected until we drop over or the computer won't boot up. Even if we don't watch or read the stuff, people around us are talking in the same divisive language or talking about the divisiveness. Just listen, get familiar with it, and ask yourself if you do it too. You would be surprised at how much divisiveness you don't even pay attention to anymore because it seems to be the backbeat of our culture. It's in your mind somewhere, and remember, your mind is what creates your world. The next practice on these 4 practices is to speak meaningfully, or refrain from idle talk. It is making sure what you're saying has relevance to you or to the person you're speaking to. That automatically disqualifies talk about celebrities, political figures, sports stars, how much weight a mutual friend gained, and a whole lot of what we talk about every day. Another of my teachers said that the teachings characterize useless or idle talk as, and I love this, quote, willingly and happily engaging in wasteful conversations about sex, crimes, war, and politics. Well, that pretty much covers it, doesn't it? And it pretty much describes what America wakes up to, goes to sleep to, eats lunch to, eats dinner to, works out to, and everything in between. We talk about it, and when we talk about it, we end up embellishing or making it even worse to sort of like get someone's attention, kind of like the child's game of telephone. I know I can jump right into a conversation about a political situation or figure, especially if I'm not too pleased. I just love to get myself all worked up about it and get all the people around me all worked up about it. And I see that many of my friends and associates do the same thing. Why? Isn't there more purpose to life to discuss than that? Talking in general, just the act of talking, robs you of focus on your own intention, robs you of your concentration, robs you of your energy. Anyone who's had the experience of creating something totally understands this. In the planning stages of a creative work, a poem, a painting, or even a new business idea, we instinctively protect that creative energy, that creative spark, by not speaking of it until the plan or artwork or project is fully formed in our own minds. Because we know it'll leak too much of the energy out. It'll extinguish the spark. The rule should probably be to talk only from a sense of purpose. Smaller purpose or larger, more universal purpose. Speak when there is a purpose for you to speak. If it can help someone, or they need to know it, it won't hurt them, then that's a good rule. The Buddha said, if he is called to tell what he knows, he answers, if he knows nothing, I know nothing. And if he knows, he answers, I know. Period. End of sentence. See, the direct result from right speech is meaningful communication that is naturally friendly and amiable towards others. If one cannot say something useful, one should keep quote-unquote noble silence. An example of noble silence is a story about a Roshi, or Zen master, and his student enjoying a beautiful morning. The student says, "What a beautiful morning!" The Roshi responds, "Yes, but what a pity to say so." I think right speech is really more about listening, those big Buddha ears, than speaking. Not the kind of listening that most of us do. That kind of listening. Someone's telling you a story or replaying some information, and you're partially listening, but the rest of your mind is formulating a response, another story, a better fact, supporting evidence, whatever. Again, check what that says about your view. right view, and about your intent, right intent. If you do that, like we all do, right? Or maybe it's just me, your view must be that that's their story, that's their experience, not mine. See, mine's more important. I better tell mine. Catch the duality and catch what that says about your intention. What are you when you're formulating that response? What is your intention? Is it to one up, outdo, challenge? Unless it's pure support for them and their story, as you would want to be supported, maybe a response isn't necessary. I know nothing. Check this in your conversations. Both Native American and Zen teachings use the term, quote, bear witness, unquote. Bearing witness to our lives in every second is a wonderful practice. Bearing witness is about experiencing life as it is, not as you would like it to be, colored by your expectations, but as it is. This is a more subtle aspect of right speech, an action resulting from incorrect thought. It is the lie that refuses to accept reality as it is, was, or will be. That reality, or suchness, as they say in Zen teachings, just is. Buddhist scholar Archie Baum writes, quote, any assertion or willingness to assert that things are or should be other than they are, or are going to be other than they are, is a lie. Unwillingness to accept things as they are is the basis of lying, and any expression of that unwillingness is wrong speech, unquote. Meditation is about bearing witness. So if you meditate, you've practiced bearing witness. If you have an itch when you are meditating, you bear witness to the itch and you don't scratch it. Then you observe how the itch goes away naturally without being scratched. If you have a thought about what to eat for breakfast or what you will say to a coworker while you're meditating, you bear witness. You don't chase the thought away and you don't get up and write down what you're going to say. Or you don't get up and have breakfast. You watch it ebb like a wave in the ocean. If we have an urge to speak, maybe we should watch it, bear witness to it, rather than give it expression immediately. I think in our Western culture, we are hardwired to respond to everything that happens to us or around us with either activity or speech. It's almost nearly impossible to deprogram ourselves from that sort of impulse or urge. Even in situations where there is absolutely nothing we can do, we still impulsively try to do or say something. But sometimes non-action is the smartest action. And sometimes not speaking is a better course than speaking. In other words, zip it. As you can see, I personally know how hard this path is. My speech is many times not right. And my biggest problem is too much of it. As this podcast is definitely being testimony to, because I said it may be the longest podcast, and I think it's going to be. So I admit this zip it part is difficult for me, but that's why it's practice. A very important practice. We stray from right speech all the time, and we feel entirely justified in doing so. The people in your world will support you in wrong speech every day. You will be enticed into wrong speech probably 100 times a day. And if you try to keep to that right speech, you won't find a lot of support for your actions. So this practice will be difficult, but I promise to try harder if you do. And that means not just refraining from wrong speech, but refraining from listening to wrong speech or approving of wrong speech, however tacitly. The people at lunch, Facebook, Twitter, all social media, TV, magazines, check it. Is it true? Is it harsh? Is it divisive, even subtly? Is it gossip? Is it unnecessary? Are you speaking to help, or are you speaking to pump up or defend your own ego? See, that's the practice, and it's a challenge. I will close with a saying I think many of you probably heard before, or many times before, And there's much debate over who the author is, so I'm not going to give you the author, but the quote investigator site online says they believe it was evolved over many decades, but points at a really cool aspect of the saying we've probably already heard, and it's sometimes attributed to Emerson or the Buddha. But the cool aspect of the thing that this quote investigator pointed out, it said that the 5 of the key words in this saying, words, actions, thoughts, characters, and habits, have initial letters that can spell the term watch, W-A-T-C-H. That is, if you switch around the use of the habits and characters. So I think it's a great mantra to practice the complete eightfold path with. Watch. The saying is, let us be mindful of our thoughts, for they become our words. Our words, for they become our actions. Our actions, for they become our habits. Our habits, for they become our character. And our character, for it becomes our destiny. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining me on this long speaking journey of not speaking so much. If you like this podcast, please consider supporting the work through ratings, reviews, or a donation on my website, everyday-buddhism.com. And until next time, keep making your everydays better.